Again, my name is Dean Garrett, and I'm going to talk a little this afternoon about the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID vaccines. I hope after the end of the presentation discussion that I can reach some people and give you a better understanding of vaccination, COVID vaccines, and perhaps influence you positively. Those of you who have not taken the vaccine or those who have relatives or friends who are still on the fence about taking the vaccine. I want this to be a simple conversation as well. So I don't want anyone to feel that he or she can't interrupt at any time. Of course, I can't take too many questions during the presentation, but if you need to stop me as I go, please do, by all means. So I have a simple outline here. I'd like to talk a little about history of vaccination, because it seems to me that suddenly with SARS and SARS-CoV and COVID vaccines, that most people are of the opinion that vaccines arrived just last year, but that is so far from the truth. And then I'll talk about common types of vaccines, because not all vaccines are made the same way, they are different. And it's important to know that they're different. Then I'd also like to get into what you all are most interested in, the COVID-19 vaccines. What are the types that are on the market? And there are many types on the market, but I will focus primarily on those that are being regulated, those that were made here in the United States and Europe, and those that have a good track record of safety and regulation. There are many out there, but if you want to know more about what is out there, the WHO site will be a good place to start. Of course, I need to convince you that there's some benefit of taking vaccines or having vaccines in our lives. But like if everything that is a biologic, as we call them, or a drug, there is a risk. There is no drug, vaccine, even some foods that do not have risk. Now, for those people who are living with kidney disease, there's been some hesitancy in whether or not they will take the vaccine, and rightly so, because they're already immunocompromised, they already have a chronic disease, and they should speak with their doctor. But I will also touch on that briefly. Since I gave this a presentation similar to this one this past March, and a lot has changed since then, and now we have all of these complications that we are hearing more about, and I will also like to talk about those. Then, of course, I'll sum up the presentation and take any questions. So, Keisha, this gave you quite an in-depth bio sketch of me, but I want to be very transparent with everyone here. So I'm a laboratory and public health scientist. I'm not a sociologist, a demographer. I like the lab work and doing what we call bench science. So I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't do a lot of modeling or any of that kind of stuff. But I am a firm believer in the benefits of vaccines. So I have taken the vaccine. I had the Moderna vaccine in February and March, the first dose in February, the second dose in March. I'm waiting to see if the FDA will recommend a booster, and if they do, I will also take the booster. And so far, I'm still alive. I haven't grown any. I don't think that anything has happened or ever changed. I still feel the same way that I felt. Actually, that is not quite true, because taking the vaccine did take a lot of stress off of me. It was very stressful to be moving around feeling unprotected. Now I feel I have a level of protection, but yes, I still wear a mask in certain places. I limit the number of people I mix with, mingle with, and I try to limit them only to people who are vaccinated. Because of my work, I'm a public health specialist, and I've spent most of my working time in Africa, primarily sub-Saharan Africa. I have been vaccinated against multiple infectious diseases. So adding COVID vaccines was not a big thing. Japanese encephalitis, yellow fever, mumps, polio, the whole works. And now that I have given you a little about me and my beliefs in vaccines, let me now go to the meat of the presentation. Are there any questions you have at this time? Okay. So I think that I should start with some basic terms, and I haven't put them in any order of importance. I've just written them down and try to explain them as simply as I can for the what we call the lay person. Because for us in this field, we always think that these terms and terminologies are simple to everybody, but it's just because we in the field are used to the language. We have our own vocabulary. So you hear a lot about an antigen, and this is, again, antigens and have been around forever. They're all out there. Any substance that is foreign to the body and it evokes an immune response is an antigen. And you want the antibody, the antigen to, and the response to be one that it makes antibodies. That's the response that one wants, not that it necessarily will kill you, but you want an antibody to be produced from that response. And if we think of people who are living with kidney diseases or people who have had transplants, we know that they have been given certain medication to dampen that immune response, because a kidney is foreign. There is no organ unless it comes from an identical twin that is as the same match. So for example, if you need a kidney and you think, okay, my brother will give me a kidney, there are a lot of research and cross matching and checking has to go into it before that person can be deemed a match. And many times that person is not deemed a match. And that is because your relative or some other person has on the cells what we call antigens. And those antigens will evoke an immune response, which will destroy the kidney or the transplanted organ, whatever it may be, a heart, a kidney, a lung. Antibodies then are the proteins that are produced in response to the antigen. And their primary purpose is to counteract the antigen, to destroy the antigen. So in this case, we have SARS-CoV-2, a virus, and the virus acts as an antigen. So when the virus gets into your body tries to defend itself. But these viruses are very smart. They are like cancer cells in some respects. They can blend in. So you don't want that to happen. So you want to get to the virus as quickly as possible before it takes over your system. Then there is DNA. And DNA, everybody has been watching a lot of sci-fi movies in the past, and we think that we can make a new person. But that is not true. That is so far from the truth. If that were the case, genetic engineering would already have made humans, made all kinds of people. But DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And this is the molecule that, if you will, that carries your genetic information. So the DNA, which makes each species unique. So a cow is not the same as a sheep, or a goat. A human is not the same as chimpanzee. But believe it or not, they are almost similar, with few variations that we humans don't want to accept because we think we are the higher species, but we are not that different. Then you have heard of messenger RNA. Messenger RNA it's a real messenger. It takes a message, and it's ribonucleic acid. And this carries the instructions from your DNA, which is in the nucleus, outside of the nucleus. And then this message instructs the cells to make a protein. So in the case of the SARS-CoV or the COVID vaccines that are made of messenger RNA, all it does is instruct your body to make a protein that is similar to one on the virus. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to have an infection and then your body tries to fight the infection, namely the SARS-CoV-2 virus, or do you want to have something that mimics this virus that is not truly the virus, but can give you a response to protect yourself against the real virus? And that is a decision that we all have to make. I made the decision, I don't want to get COVID. So I'm going to stop as many things in my favor. Then we are hearing a lot about research. We ask people, why aren't you taking the vaccine? And many people are saying, oh, I have to do, we call this vaccine hesitancy. they're waiting to see what happens if some of their neighbors drop dead or grow some strange appendage, or they have to do research, or they feel that the vaccines are not safe. But what really is research? I mean, there are many definitions, but again, if you think of research, research has to be careful, or a diligent search. It's not simply a Google search. That is not research. That is just what that is. Google search or Facebook search or whoever. But if you want to really do it, then it has to be a diligent undertaking. And I think some of you people who are audience members who go to church, like you, Alan, you remember there's a passage, I think somewhere in James, that talk about searching diligently. You're smiling. Or we can call it a studious inquiry or examination, especially an investigation or experimentation that is trying to discover new facts or how to interpret it, with the object of either the theory might need some tweaking, or you may have to change your way about doing something. I don't know, but that's what it is all about. And not simply it's not simply making a search. Okay, are there any questions at this time? Okay, so now some continuing on, we hear about the efficacy of a vaccine. And what does that really mean? The efficacy is that the vaccines work as intended, but under these ideal conditions. And I will speak some more about how this unfolds. Because if something works well under ideal conditions, which means that, like, again, I'm a lab scientist, so we tend to have everything controlled. It doesn't mean it will work well in the real world, which is the effectiveness. So if I give you a vaccine in a lab or in a study, and I tell you, well, you should not take aspirin, you should not drink monkey rum, you should not do something, then that's an ideal situation. But what if I give you the vaccine and then you go out and you live as normal? You sleep when you want, you don't sleep when you want, you stay when you want, you eat whatever you want. That's a real world condition. So does the vaccine still work under those conditions? COVID, coronavirus disease, SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2019, because that's when it was discovered or given its name. And then there are two big areas that I wish to speak about. And this is what is an EUA and what is FDA approval. Now, here in the US, these have become very contentious terminologies, because we find that people here says, oh, it doesn't have the FDA approval, the vaccine that is. It's only an emergency use authorization, which happened for the two vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, initially. And this is a route that most medicines and drugs go through, based on the circumstances. An FDA approval here in the US, and the Europeans have their own way of granting approval, but it's a similar process. You give a license. So the manufacturer of the drug, the manufacturer of the vaccine will be given a drug, and a license, sorry. And I've been thinking about how to explain this, and I think that maybe the closest, in a Bayesian term, I think the closest I can come to is people who work for the government and the civil service, who've been there for 10 years, 15 years, but they're not appointed. Now, we cannot go and say that those people aren't doing good work, or that they haven't contributed, or that somehow what they're doing isn't of benefit to the government and people of Barbados. But then the next day, the government says, we are going to appoint you to the civil service, but they're the same people. They have been doing the work forever. Nothing has changed, no more than granting them some kind of paper, completing a piece of paperwork. But let me be very clear here, what the FDA says about the vaccine process. Vaccine development and clinical trial processes from EUA, that is the emergency use and authorization, as well as the approval, are essentially the same. No vaccine can receive either designation without meeting rigorous scientific standards for safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality. So then you will ask me, how do they differ? Well, basically, an emergency use authorization is what it says. There's an emergency. We had a public health emergency in a pandemic caused by this virus, SARS-CoV-2. So we can't just sit there and wait forever without allowing people to get their drugs to market. So there was a concerted effort from many researchers and money put into developing a vaccine. When the FDA approves a drug, it goes on to say the agency has determined based on substantial evidence. So now the real world situation comes back where thousands of people, millions of people have taken a drug over a specific period of time, and the FDA is still not seeing that the risk outweigh the benefits. Then at that point, the FDA may give an approval. All right. So let's talk about vaccination. Vaccination, from the Latin vaccinus, meaning of or from the cow. This is where this term came from. First recorded cases of vaccination were in 1796 by Edward Jenner. And of course, other people might have done it, but we don't know. So this is why I have first in quotes. He used fluid from cow pustules to vaccinate milkmaids against chicken pox. So you had a sore. Some people had cowpox. They had a sore, a blister. He used the pus, and then he vaccinated the milkmaids. And then what he found was that the milkmaids were not coming down with the chicken pox. And I have smallpox, but I should be against smallpox. Sorry, it should not be chicken pox. It should be smallpox. In 1980, the WHO declared smallpox eradicated because of a vaccine. So we no longer have to suffer the ravages of smallpox. So let's move on from there. So how do we make these vaccines? Well, the scientists, the lab people, they take parts of a virus, or usually a virus or bacteria, or some substance that is produced by these viruses and bacteria. And of course, you're interested in making a vaccine to prevent a disease. When you get the vaccine then will teach your body how to make the antibodies. Remember, I defined that earlier on, to defend against the real viruses and bacteria. The vaccines are not going to give you the disease. That is just counterintuitive and counterproductive. Antibodies alone do not destroy or eliminate the viruses and bacteria from the body. You need the other cells in the blood that help. So it's an integrated process. It's like a chain, a system. And that's more complicated and beyond the scope of this presentation, so I will not go there, but just to let you know that you need more than antibodies. The vaccines will not cause the disease that they were designed to prevent. And because they're not medicine, you cannot give the vaccine after you have had the infection or come down with, in our case, with COVID, and hope that the vaccine is somehow going to help you. You have to get the vaccine before you get the infection. So here are two pictures, one on your left and one on the right. And the red ball with the spikes on the left, that is a rendering. That's a rendering of the virus, SARS-CoV-2 virus. And the blue projection, that is a cell, a receptor. So the virus has to bind to that, like a docking station. And when it docks there, then it is internalized. That is, it is taken within the cell, and then it takes over the cell's machinery, and it makes more copies of itself, and then it overruns your body, and you can't breathe. Your lungs start to fill with fluid, and then some of us succumb. Now, we don't want that to happen. So if you produce these antibodies, the antibodies here on the right, this picture on the right, will bind to those red projections on the virus. And if the antibodies bind to those red projections, the virus cannot bind to the blue projections, which are on your left, which are the receptors on the cell. They cannot get into your cell. So you get confer some protection. It is as simple and as complicated as that is. Now, of course, viruses are very smart and they will change. And I will speak a little about how they change, how they can change. Now, not to bore you, but just to let you give you more information perhaps than you need, we have heard of vaccines, having to take vaccines since you were children. We were children to go to primary school. We have to, so back then, the common ones were the mumps, measles, and rubella, MMR. These are made of live viruses, but these viruses cannot give you the disease because they have been what we call attenuated. They've been weakened. The disease causing attributes or characteristics has been removed. But your body doesn't know that. The body doesn't just recognizes a certain protein on the virus. And because, again, remember, these are antigens. They're not supposed to be in your blood. So your body says, this is something that is foreign. I don't want this thing in the blood. I am going to make an antibody to rid the blood of it. Then you have these ones that are what they call inactivated. So you may take the bacteria or the virus, you kill them, quote unquote, and you use that as an antigen. And these are for hepatitis A, polio, rabies. And then we have the ones for whooping cough, which killed a lot of children in the 60s, I believe. They give strong immunity, and they give them primarily to people with weakened immune system, because although the vaccines don't cause the disease, we do not want to stress someone who already has a weakened immune system, because there are other cells that are at play and other chemicals that can be produced. So you want to give them a gradual, tweak their immune system gradually, not overwhelm them. Then I will leave the toxide one out, so I will go now to what the viral vector, because I think that these are ones that everybody is talking about in case of SARS, COVID. Everybody thinks that, oh, they're giving us a viral vector, a vaccine. One of my colleagues, he is of the opinion that the vaccine has chimpanzee cells, and it's all because of a misunderstanding of how the vaccines are made. So basically, a vector is something that carries something else. And in the molecular world, the biology world, a viral vector is used to carry a part of a virus into a cell. The vector could be another virus, but that virus doesn't cause any disease. Maybe you can get colds from the virus, but usually there are animals that have viruses, like there are animals that live comfortably with Ebola. Well, Ebola is dangerous to humans, but there are viruses that don't cause any disease, or that can be treated in such a way not to cause any disease, but they are used to deliver the antigen. So in this case, the viral vector is a chimpanzee virus. And this is where the confusion came from, that the vaccines have chimpanzee cells. They do not have, you cannot put chimpanzee cells in a human because those cells are foreign. Then they will cause a reaction. So you want to just deliver the Ebola, the COVID virus, part of the virus, the spikes. Then we have what we are calling mRNA, remember, messenger RNA vaccines. These for sure cannot give you COVID because they do not have any part of the virus whatsoever. A messenger RNA is just a group of ribonucleic acids, and they are different ones. So it's like an alphabet, and they are grouped in threes. So you can have, let's say you were writing a letter, you write A, B, C, then you stop, D, E, F, you stop, and so on. Those instructions mean something to a cell, but they're not part of the virus. They're just the instruction to tell the cell to make the protein what we are calling the spike protein, the projections that are coming off the virus. And when your body makes them then and the cells see those proteins are foreign, then you make antibodies. Another misconception about these messenger RNA vaccines is that they were made overnight, that somehow this research happened just because of COVID. No, that can never happen. That didn't happen, and it could never happen. You can't make them that quickly. Scientists have been researching coronaviruses for many, many years and working on messenger RNA technology. The difference here is that we have a pandemic, we have an emergency, and all the scientists and technology was ramped up in order to find a way as quickly as and safely as possible to address the pandemic. A messenger RNA vaccine is easier to make than the others, and you can make billions of doses. You see it every day. There have been some work with these messenger RNAs. Some have been made for Zika, the rabies, and influenza. Do you have any questions before I move on? Okay, so there, as I said before, there are many COVID vaccines or many vaccines against COVID on the market. I am not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to talk about a few of them and how they differ. So AstraZeneca, I believe, was in Barbados, and the J&J and Sputnik, made by the Russians, these are viral vector vaccines. Moderna and Pfizer, which are the ones that we have here in the US, are messenger RNA vaccines. And Sinovac are killed or inactivated virus. So you take the virus, you kill it, you inactivate it, and you use it as an antigen. So why should you take vaccines, or what is the benefit of taking vaccines? Vaccines are not the only intervention that have been beneficial to man in terms of improving the health of man. So I don't think anyone is making that claim. Nutrition has been important, antibiotics, water and sanitation, improvement in water and sanitation. But the vaccines have been one of those tools in the arsenal. Since the introduction of vaccine, there's been dramatic reduction in childhood mortality from vaccine preventable illnesses, such as measles, the mumps, polio, and whooping cough. Also, the vaccines, getting vaccinated when you're a child or even in your adulthood, you give some kind of protection. So the populace is protected. So you have hepatitis B. Everybody knows that tuberculosis, you got at that time, it wasn't even a jab. It was more of a cut in your skin for the TB, shingles, pneumonia. And then for health workers and pregnant women, especially, because a pregnant woman does not you don't want a pregnant woman to get tetanus because the toxin can kill the growing fetus. Now, COVID vaccines. COVID vaccines will prevent COVID-related deaths. We have seen that here in the US. The data here and the reports here is very clear. In the county, which is analogous to, I guess, a village in Barbados, almost 100%, 99 point something percent, 99% of the people who have subsequently died from COVID have been unvaccinated. Now, people who have had vaccines have gotten COVID. Those are what we call the breakthrough cases, and everybody is going to say, well, how can that be? And I will try to explain. So the COVID vaccines also prevent disease and complications from disease. And remember, being infected with a virus is not necessarily the same as having a disease. For example, take HIV. You may have HIV, the virus, but you do not have AIDS. So even if you have a breakthrough case of COVID, where the virus can be detected. It hasn't taken over your body to the point where your lungs are now chewed up. And that is exactly what it does to people. Chew the lungs, and those that are lucky can, if you want to call it that, can have lung transplant, but many of them die. COVID vaccines will also reduce transmission. So from one person, the spread of the virus from one person to the next. And they also protect the community. And this is this herd immunity thing that you have heard a lot about. I have some colleagues in East Africa from Rwanda. And one of them told me a few weeks ago, oh, almost everybody here in Rwanda has been vaccinated. And I said, well, why? How was that possible? He said, we just got tired of the lockdown. We just got tired of not being able to live our lives normally. So it wasn't that they were so keen per se on getting a vaccine, but they wanted some normalcy in their life. So if this is what will happen, I think. And Barbados, unfortunately, is seeing quite a dramatic increase in cases. Okay. So if you want numbers, these are some numbers that I pulled from off the website. And you can see you have diphtheria, measles, mumps, pertussis, which is a whooping cough. The cases, 100% reduction in cases, 100% reduction in death. All the vaccines have not prevented all the cases, but most of the vaccines have prevented death from the cases. So this is a very good thing. For example, mumps. Children still got mumps, 97.4% reduction, but look at the deaths, 100% reduction. And then this is a decline in measles cases and deaths after the introduction of measles vaccines, which came around 1960, 63-ish period. And these numbers are per 100,000 population. This is a log scale. So if you look at the blue line, the one at the top, and to the far left, that number, the first data point is maybe about 200 plus cases, then it goes up to 600. But the take-home message from this is, look at the two lines. The cases of measles, yes, they all started to decline, as well as the deaths. But there comes a point where the deaths are almost zero, but yet you still have some cases. So it isn't that if you take a vaccine necessarily that you're not going to get the infection at all, but you may get a mild form of it and you may survive. Okay, so now I want to talk a little about these vaccines and vaccines in general and how their safety and efficacy and so on is assessed. Before they are given to people in the general public, they have to go through what we call clinical trials. And the purpose of the clinical trial is to get information on the safety. Are these vaccines, drugs, whatever it is, are they safe? Are they efficacious? Are they effective? Do they have side effects? And a side effect is not necessarily the same as an adverse reaction. So you want to record all of those. After I had my vaccine, Moderna, I was called for, I think it was like 2 weeks. I had to go and on the computer and put in any signs, anything that happened. It doesn't matter what it was anything that was different than you had before. Clinical trials are usually divided into 3 major phases. So you have phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1, you get a group of healthy people, volunteers, and you want to assess the safety of the vaccine. Now, then you want to know if it works, because it may not work. If it doesn't work, but it works or it's not safe, then the study is finished. If it works, you now need to move to phase 2. And this is what they call double-blinded. That is, the researchers don't know who is getting the vaccine, or the people don't know who is getting the vaccine or who is getting what we call a placebo, a dummy vaccine. Neither group knows, but there is someone, of course, who knows, but not the researchers, because we do not want to introduce any semblance or appearance of bias. You have hundreds of volunteers, And you cannot just look for healthy people or people who only have heart problems or whatever, asthma. You have to get people with all different health statuses, healthy, unhealthy, diabetes, no diabetes. They have to be from different demographic groups, or black, white, blue, the whole spectrum. Now you have information on the safety, common and short-term side effects, and the risk and the dose immune response. That is, do I need to give you 200 milligrams or micrograms of the vaccine to get a good response for you to produce antibodies, or can I give you 50? Because if I can give you 50 and get the same result, then why would I give you 100? I wouldn't. After that, you move to phase 3. Phase 3 now is a study that involves thousands of people from broad groups and also from different countries. And in this case, you get more information on safety and effectiveness. So now you have these people that are free living, they're going about their business, they're doing whatever they wish. After a few months or however long you run the study, you collect your information, you analyze it, and you see if the vaccine or the drug is still working as intended. Now, one of my nephews called me a few nights ago because he took I think it's Pfizer you have in Barbados at the moment. He took the vaccine and he had this reaction. And of course, his mother, she was very worried. So I told him that he didn't need to worry because actually what was happening to him was a very good thing. And these are some of the effects of the vaccines and COVID vaccines in particular. People have soreness at the injection site. The first dose I had stiffness. My arm was stiff for not a days, but maybe a day. And I didn't need to take any aspirin or any Tylenol, anything like that. Some people have redness radiating from the injection site. Some people have itching. Many people have complained of feeling tired, drowsy. Some people had chills or fever. The first dose I had what I call a hay fever, like a slight temperature, ran a few hours through the day. The next day was okay. But the second dose, I had chills. I had intermittent chills, but I wasn't worried about it. Actually, I was very happy because these are signs that the vaccine has prompted or evoked an immune response and your body is responding. And this is what you want. You want your body to respond to make antibodies to protect you from the real disease or infection. Now, as I said, every drug biologic has some risk. And there have been reports of people having blood clots. I think with Moderna and J&J, and some people have myocarditis, which is like a little inflammation around the heart, which clears up. It's nothing, according to the cardiologist, that anyone has to be overly worried about. And some people can have anaphylactic shock from ingredients in the vaccine. Now, when you take a drug, any drug, not only COVID vaccine, but when you go to your doctor, you should talk to the doctor and tell the doctor everything that you take and any reactions that you might have or might have had, because something as simple as, let's say, cinnamon may cause you to have an anaphylactic shock. You may say it's just a spice, but for some people it is not. For some people it's an allergen and can become an antigen. And then you find that they have problems. Now, people living with kidney disease, I know that this is a big concern. I am not a medical physician, but I have not seen, heard, or any reports here from CDC, the NIH, or anywhere else that these COVID vaccines pose any greater risk to people living with kidney disease than people who do not have kidney disease. Because, for example, the vaccines were tested in people with all kinds of diseases, including people with kidney diseases. And they didn't see any more sign of a risk. A rare A rare adverse effect is usually a case or that occurs in 1 in 100,000 people. So in Barbados, which has, let's say, 300,000 people, we know they're not all eligible for vaccination because of the under 12, but let's round them up to 300,000. If you took 300,000 people and you gave them all a vaccine, you may, for every 100,000 people, you may have one death. So 3 people out of the 300,000 people. Right now, you have what, 78 deaths, almost 9,000 cases, and you're still rising. So when people start to debate the benefits against the risk, these are the things that they should be looking at. Now, I have here, are you still with me? Here, in contrast, there's studies that show that people living with kidney disease, and especially those who get a severe form of COVID, will have what we call electrolyte abnormalities. And Alan and others, you know about this better than me, because these are something that you have to think about: your potassium levels, your sodium levels. So now this leads us to long COVID, because here in the US, for a long time, young people thought that they were invincible, that they couldn't get COVID. And if they got COVID, it's not a big deal. Okay, so let me put this in perspective. Most people who get COVID will not die from COVID. Right now, the global death rate is around 2% globally. Of course, it's more in some countries and less in. Barbados hovers around 1% or thereabout, but it is starting to increase. But you have to ask yourself, do I want a disease that can perhaps lead me with complications? And why would I even want to take that risk? So we talk about long COVID. So what we are seeing now is that some people who have COVID, they develop this condition. They call it long COVID, post-COVID syndrome, long haul COVID, chronic COVID syndrome, and post-acute sequelae of SARS-CoV-2 infection. That is a very medical term. Some of these common symptoms of long COVID are loss of taste and smell. Now, I don't know about you, but I would like to maintain my sense of taste and smell, because we have 5 of them. If we lose 2 of them, that is 40% of them gone, and they must be there for some reason. So I want to be able to taste and smell. I don't want to have this thing bother me for a long time. Chronic fatigue syndrome, people have shortness of breath, pounding heartbeat, problems with memory, concentration, or sleeping, which they're calling this brain fog, depression, anxiety, and so on. Now, what happens, or what the research is showing us, is that we know the virus damages the lungs. You can't breathe. But it is also damaging your heart, your brain, GI systems, and nerves. And in the long COVID, the organs that are most commonly affected, are seen, are your lungs, with pneumonia with scarring of your lung tissue. So you may survive, you may not die, but you still have a compromised lung function. Your heart, your inflammation of the heart lining or damage to the heart muscle. Brain, some people suffer strokes and seizures, and kidney, acute kidney injury, and liver injury to your liver. And you may not feel the injury to the liver, but you'll see in the blood that some of the enzymes, these substances produced by your liver, are increased. Now, who gets long COVID? Well, apparently it can be anyone who has ever had COVID. If you had a mild form, a moderate form, or severe, it doesn't seem to matter. Because right now, the data are showing that 10% of the cases of people who are 18 to 49 years and 22% of those who are 70 years and older are developing long COVID. Do you have any questions? Okay, so in summary, I am confident that vaccines are safe, that they are effective at preventing illness and in some cases death. They will reduce the severity of the disease in question. Even if you get the infection, you may not have a severe disease outcome. They protect the individuals and the community. And the community is just what we call this herd immunity. You want to reduce the spread of the virus, and more so, you want to stop the replication of the virus. No, if you don't take a vaccine, or if you don't prevent yourself from ever getting the virus and the virus gets into you, even if you survive, the virus has a chance of changing because it's making many copies of itself. And as it does that, it may make a subtle change. It is still deadly. It can become more deadly, but it may make it a change that the vaccines that are being used do not work against it. Now, as the Rwandans said, they wanted to resume some kind of normal life. So just imagine you can go back to some kind of normalcy. You can go to work, you can go to school. I know people want to go to church. They don't want a Zoom church. They want to be in the church singing lustily. They want to carry on their social activities. In March, when I gave a similar presentation, there were 327 million doses of vaccines were administered, and there were very rare reports of vaccine-induced deaths. Today, oops, sorry, I missed in 2 slides, sorry. But today you have, instead of 327 million, now we have nearly 6 billion doses of vaccines have been administered, still with rare reports of vaccine in death. And if you think about it, if the vaccines are as bad as the COVID, and COVID has killed 2% of all those people that has infected, then if comparing apples, the same apple to the same apple, the vaccine should kill 2% of those that have received the vaccine. And we have not seen anything even remotely close to that. Yes, some people have died, and some people have died as a direct consequence, I believe, of vaccine, but some people have died because death is just a part of life, and it was just a coincidence, a causal thing. It wasn't an association. It wasn't a causation. The vaccines didn't cause the death. It's just that they took a vaccine and something else happened in life. So I would encourage those who came this afternoon, who were interested in this chat, perhaps to get some more information on vaccines, vaccination, and COVID, and so on, to get yourselves vaccinated. Think about yourself, your children, your community, going back to work, and doing those things that you want to and love doing. Now, this slide here is a slide I pulled. I was thinking, what is this herd immunity? You know, how can I explain this in pictorially? And these are emperor penguins in the Arctic. And this is what the epidemiologists are really talking about when they talk about herd immunity. The penguins on the outside are taking the brunt of the cold air, and the heat is being radiated inwards. And that is keeping the penguins inside warm. Now they have a system. Yes, the ones on the outside will not remain there forever. They know when to switch. So they will switch out, and then the ones inside, and then this is what the vaccines will do if a certain percentage of people at least get vaccinated. And typically you want about 80%, because COVID is fairly infectious. But maybe about 80% of the people. And even those people who are not vaccinated will have some protection. I didn't pull all of this out of the air. I use resources, the WHO, the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention here in the US, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. Then there's this, the government, the US government has a clinical trial site. You can go there and find out everything about any clinical trial, who is it, not the names of the people, but how many people were involved, what kind of reactions they had, how long the trial was for. how much money was given to researchers, then the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, vaccines, ASCP, the American Society for Clinical Pathology, All World in Data. I think this is out of Oxford and Cambridge. Then the US government's Genome Project, Merriam-Webster, and the American Association for Clinical Chemistry. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time and attention, giving me the opportunity to talk a little about vaccines, COVID, and public health in general. And I will leave you with a beautiful image of the Namib Valley in Namibia, desert, sorry, in Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Garrett. That was definitely very informative. I think that stopped a lot of misconceptions on my part as well about vaccination and the vaccine. So I think it has helped a lot of people, and we are going away with a lot more information than we came here with.
Thank you.
I have 3 short questions, very, very short questions. First of all,
so I just want to say quickly that we also have one of our dialysis patients who is vaccinated that wants to share her story about catching COVID while being vaccinated.
Oh.
So we're just going to take a couple of questions, then we're going to go to that, and then we can have some more questions. So go ahead, Alan, of course.
Yeah, okay. First of all, Dr. Garrett,
Yes,
you mentioned the AAU and the FDA. Is the major difference, right? At the stage that they got approved from the AAU, you've only done testing in the lab, but then when it gets to the FDA, we've done a lot of empirical testing with people with all kinds of diseases in all parts of the world. Is that the major difference?
No, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. No. So an EUA is basically it's an emergency use authorization, but the drug or vaccine has to go through the same process. So you have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Oh, okay.
But the FDA is very reticent to give approval to any new drugs. So it takes forever, you know, it runs like molasses. So it wants to see the drug or the vaccine being used not only in, I don't know their number, but perhaps let's say not 100,000 people, but 500,000 people. Then they start to get some kind of comfort level. So before, remember, I told you we only had 329 million people, doses of vaccines that were given. Now we have 6 billion. And they haven't seen any increase in risk from these vaccines. So that's the difference. But they all have the EUA and a full approval to get those designations. The drug or vaccine has to go through the same processes.
Oh, and we just ask one other question.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Alan, your microphone is...
Sorry. When you have taken both sets of the vaccine, and you have...
Oh dear, it went again. Oh dear, he's like lost to the region.
What? I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, when you have taken the vaccine and you have no symptoms, is this an indication that the vaccine is not working?
It is not necessarily that it is not working, but your body is probably taking its time to get revved up. And this is why you can't take the vaccine today and just tomorrow say, okay, well, I'm going to take my mask off and I'm going to socialize with these unvaccinated people. You still have to protect yourself. Everybody has a different response to vaccine. And unfortunately, there are some people who do not respond, but those are very rare. Those are very few people. But some people have what we call robust immune systems. So any allergen or antigen can marshal their troops, as we say. We call antibodies troops. So it's like they're always ready. Your body's always ready to fight. There are some people, their system doesn't respond like that, but it is making them. Now, the true the way to tell if you have these antibodies will be through a blood test, but that is not necessary at this time. So I wouldn't worry if I didn't have chills if I were you, but I believe that if you took the vaccine, you had some kind of stiffness, or you've had some kind of feeling of fatigue or a slight fever or something. You must have had some kind of change.
Yeah, on the first one, but the second one, I had no symptoms on the second dose. First, he had a headache, etc., but the second one, nothing at all. That's it.
Mm. Okay. And you were saying you had a third question, 3 short questions?
Yeah, I didn't want to hog, so I left.
No, please, I will.
No. Okay, what it was that you mentioned breakthrough cases, right? Are these cases, in these cases, is the virus weaker, or are they less in number than if you did not have the vaccine?
Okay, so I think if I understand your question, you want to know if someone takes the vaccine, ends up with a breakthrough case, is it the number of viral particles in their body, is it less than if they didn't have the vaccine?
Yeah.
I would wager to say yes, that they are less, because the number of particles is also related to the severity of the disease, just like in HIV. We call this a viral load, a viral level. So if you have billions of these particles versus millions, then you can have more severe disease. But the body is so strange and so unique that some people may have 1 million virions and they have a worse reaction than somebody who has a billion. So it's not always a one-to-one, but typically that is what it is.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
Does anybody else have any quick questions they would like to ask? Any more questions for anybody?
Yes, I have a question, if that's okay.
Go right
Yes,
ahead.
of course, please. I'm here.
You spoke about patients with renal disease having the possibility of having long COVID, and even people who don't have those conditions as well. I was wondering, like, at what point do we encourage them to get vaccinated if they have long COVID? Is it safe for them to get vaccinated while they have long COVID?
That's a question I don't believe I am the best person to answer, because that's a very clinical, and that was something that someone who would have to speak with his or her physician about. If you have COVID, a long COVID, you already have the disease and you're making some antibodies, but I think vaccination will still be of benefit. Here there's a recommendation still that even if someone has had COVID, they wait a few months and then they go ahead and get vaccinated. I would expect that it would be the same in these patients you're talking about, you're mentioning, but I would say that the best option would be for that person or persons to speak with the physician and about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to thank Dr. Garrett for speaking to us about vaccines and for giving us a better understanding about how these COVID vaccines work. So thank you so much, Dr. Garrett, for that.
You're welcome.
Right now, we want to introduce Ms. Tara Burke. She is one of our dialysis patients, and she wants to, she's going to share her COVID experience. She's fully vaccinated, but she caught COVID-19, and she just wants to share that experience and how it affected her being vaccinated on dialysis and having caught COVID. So please go ahead, Ms. Burke. Thank you so much for sharing this story with us.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi, in case y'all don't know, my name is Tara Burke. I am a dialysis patient at the St. John Clinic. I do dialysis 3 days a week. I've been on dialysis for a period of time now. I'm functioning very well with my dialysis team. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, I contracted COVID. I guess like most of us, we've been taking precaution. I don't know about the others, but I have from very early decided to get my vaccination so that I myself could be protected. When I knew that the vaccines were available, I took the time, I did the research, and I was aware of the fact that even if I contracted COVID, it would reduce my risk of having severe symptoms. I went ahead and I got my vaccine, and like Dr. Garrett stated, I had some residual feelings after my vaccination. I experienced some chills and some fever over the weekend, but by my next dialysis date, I was good to go. After my second shot, I was fine. I didn't receive any sort of effect. However, like I said, after doing all you do to protect yourself from COVID, I still, however, contracted COVID. It is an unfortunate experience in that COVID is so strange. We don't know who we may contact this virus from. As stated before, we have people in and among our community that are asymptomatic. And in a situation like that, a person like me that has a chronic disease, that taking every precaution and still doing all the right things, still you can't look at someone and see that they have COVID. If they're asymptomatic, they show no signs. When I say no signs, I mean no sign whatsoever. I came in contact with someone that was asymptomatic. I'm very well aware of the person. And they too then found out that they were positive after I myself got my tests coming back as positive. We made the steps to go forward to have treatment done, which would be to be isolated. In going through the process as a dialysis patient and having had COVID, it is a very strange experience because if you do not listen to your body, you could very well find yourself experiencing these symptoms and mistaking them for something else. The reason I chose to speak to everyone today is because I'm a firm believer in us as dialysis patients having every opportunity and in every instance having the best care, because the reason you're on dialysis is to prolong your life. As a patient, I have had 3 days of dialysis and I contracted COVID and I experienced my first symptoms on Friday. That would be my last day that I would have had dialysis. After having that, I worked hard to schedule my next day of dialysis. With the numbers rising and with the advent of care that we have in our society, there was some issues in scheduling dialysis at the time. So for those that are on dialysis and may come in contact with anyone and may end up finding themselves in a situation where they have to have dialysis, this is a cautionary tale to be aware that even in the event of something like this, yes, it is a life-saving treatment. With everything and having a healthcare system under so much pressure, there's no guarantee that that is going to be a readily available service at the time that you may need it. In my experience, it was not very difficult to go through what I went through. And I give that a lot, I must say, must be given to the vaccine. Because I believe that if I did not have my full vaccination, it could have been a lot worse. The symptoms came on me very fast. I experienced things very quickly. Within hours, I was experiencing everything possible, from the cough to the runny nose, to the sore throat, to the pains, to the fevers, even to the skin rash. I experienced loss of smell. I still am experiencing loss of smell. So I myself am also experiencing symptoms of long COVID. It is not an easy experience because mentally you have to be strong, especially with going through dialysis, as well as having a sickness. You have to physically make the effort to move. It is not a disease that if you get it, you can lay down and say, oh, I'll just take 2 Panadols, or I'll be good. You have to get up. You have to go out. You have to take fresh air. You have to be active because your body needs that energy. It needs to be moving. It affects your lungs, but if you don't give yourself the opportunity to breathe deeply and get moving, it's going to take hold of your body. My experience, like I said, was not necessarily the best experience, neither was it the worst experience. But having had COVID and having had seen what I have seen, this is a cautionary tale for many. If you are not sure if taking the vaccination is for you, do everything possible to keep to yourself, limit your interactions. Please be very careful. You can't look at someone and see if they have COVID. That is the truth. COVID is real. It is very real. It doesn't tell you when it is coming. If it does affect you, please be careful, because you yourself could be a person that does not experience symptoms, but yet transmit this disease. Please be careful. Please be mindful. With this in mind, I'm saying this. I'm thankful very much for my dialysis team. Without them, I would not be here. They have beyond measure, I must say, to my most beloved nurse, Paula Nurse, I am thankful for everything you have done to make sure that I stayed strong, and the encouragements daily, as well as my dialysis family, every day sent encouraging words, and it kept me motivated to continue. Without you, I don't know how, but I know it would not have been any easier. I am most thankful and most appreciative. Thank you very much for hearing me this evening.